Today we'll be talking about the Addiesdive AD2033, and this is a diver watch, like a diver through and through, and it looks special. It's not like the usual budget option. So this thing here is $70 before tax, but what we get is a box sapphire crystal, all stainless steel. We get a 5-link bracelet. This is an interesting watch, and the fact is, I do think that the face of it looks a bit like the Ranger, slightly, like there's a bit of that look. And then we get a rotating bezel, which basically throws that idea out the window. But this rotating bezel is actually covered by hardlex glass, so you get that 3D pop. And then you get the luminosity, because it's an Addiesdive. And it's not just great on the dial, this bezel is actually luminous as well. So there's a lot to talk about in regards to the Addiesdive AD2033. Now, the affiliate link will be in the description below. There you will also find some discount codes, so please use them because that just gives you more savings. And then, of course, there'll be a link to my collection. So basically, in one place, we have all the watches we've been discussing lately in one place. And now let's dive in and talk about this AD2033 in detail. Let's do it. Alright, so looking straight down at the Addiesdive AD2033, this is one of those watches that plays much larger than it measures, and that's down to the way the case architecture works. On paper, we've got a 41mm case diameter, 13.8mm thickness, 48.5mm lug to lug, and a 20mm lug width, tapering down to 16mm at the clasp. But once the watch is on the wrist, it just melts right in. You've got those long, sharply downturning lugs that wrap the wrist like they were sculpted to fit. Even on my 6.5-inch wrist, there's almost zero overhang. It hugs tight and balanced. The side profile is another highlight. The tall polished flank gives it a sleek presence, and underneath you can spot the lip of the screw-down case back, while up top the coin edge bezel sits brushed and sharply cut. That bezel grip is phenomenal. Deep, well-defined notches that actually make it easier to turn even when you're wearing gloves. I've tested it. The 120 click rotation is crisp, clean, and evenly resisted. You can tell this wasn't an afterthought kind of bezel. The transition from that mirror polished flank to the brushed lug hoods are done via smooth chamfers. There are no sharp corners on this case. And those end links, the integration with the bracelet is almost seamless, perfectly contoured, and really ups the quality feel. So yes, it might read like a 41mm dive on spec, but visually and ergonomically, it wears like something much smaller. So Addiesdive did nail the proportions on this one. We really need to discuss the crown action on this Addiesdive because it's genuinely impressive for a quartz diver watch. So inside we've got the Seiko VH31 caliber. So you get that smooth sweeping seconds hand, 4 ticks per second, giving that automatic-like flow. So essentially we are mimicking an automatic, and I think there's a growing fan base for the sweeping seconds hand movement. Because ultimately these movements are super accurate. We get a variance of up to 20 seconds a month and very low maintenance with the battery swap every 3 years or so. So now unscrew the crown and you'll feel a nice resistance in the threads. Refined but firm, pull it out and setting the time is buttery smooth. There's no play, no jolt, no slack in the motion at all. Land the minute hand, push the crown back in and it stays perfectly in place. There is no drift whatsoever. Screw it back down and it locks in tight with confidence. Now let's look at the bezel, because it really does deserve a closer look. It's not your typical entry-level diver bezel, although the price is still very much entry-level. What we've got here is a black insert that sits beneath a layer of hardlex crystal, so it's not quite ceramic scratch resistance, but far tougher than standard mineral glass. That crystal overlay gives the bezel a gorgeous 3-dimensional effect, a kind of optical depth that catches light beautifully and elevates the whole presence of the watch. Structurally, the bezel itself is tall, brushed on the top surface, and ever so slightly overhangs the midcase. That little detail makes all the difference. When you're gripping it, even with gloves on, it's easy to get a solid hold of it. The coin edge machining is deep, crisp, and very much tactile. Now, the rotation action, that's where it gets really satisfying. It's a 120-click unidirectional system, and resistance across the cycle is consistent, firm, but smooth. The feedback is distinct and mechanical, a soft, ratchety click that feels almost vault-like in precision. At each detent, there's a hint of play, not because it's loose, but because of the natural tolerances at the click point itself. Between detents though, it's rock solid. There's no drift, no float, and honestly, it's very reminiscent of the bezels you find on watch dive pieces. Crisp, confident, and engineered to feel far more expensive than they are. The bracelet on the AD2033 is one of those details that really catches you off guard. In a good way. Well, until you get to the tolerances. But let's do it in order. This is a 5-link design, and the integration with the case head is surprisingly almost seamless. The outer and central links are brushed so finely they almost look bead blasted, while the 2 inner rows of links are polished and multifaceted, giving off that rice bead shimmer. It's a striking balance, tool watch toughness with a touch of refinement, making it perfectly wearable in the office as much as on a dive. Now, the bracelet is held together with push pins, so not top tier construction, but the link articulation is okay, and it drapes the wrist pretty well as well. At the clasp, we tape it down to 16mm, which adds a bit of elegance. The clasp itself is fully milled, signed on the brushed top plate with a polished 45-degree chamfer running along the edge. You get 5 micro adjustments to find that perfect fit, and the double pushers deploy a solid milled folding wing inside. Flip the watch over and you'll see the screw-down case back, edged with the usual specs like 200 meters, sapphire crystal, stainless steel. Altogether, it's a thoughtful, well-executed bracelet that's both rugged and surprisingly refined in terms of looks, although the tolerances could be better. There's quite a bit of stretch to this bracelet. Let's take a look at center stage, because that's where you'll be looking most of the time. When you look straight down at it, you're greeted by a large open dial, framed by a fairly slim bezel, which immediately gives the whole piece a clean, spacious look. But as soon as you tilt it, that's when the magic starts happening. The crystal here is sapphire, domed and slightly boxed. And because it's only single domed, the distortion you get at the edges is just gorgeous, well, for this type of watch. The curvature plays beautifully with the printed minute track and applied markers beneath, giving this watch a real vintage diver character. The deep rehaut only exaggerates that distortion, adding a sense of depth and immersion when viewed from an angle. Drop below the crystal and you've got a matte black dial. Simple, crisp and well proportioned. The applied indices are edged in chrome, and the Arabic numerals at 3, 6, 9 and 12 keep everything symmetrical and perfectly balanced. The handset is instantly recognizable, that broad arrow hour hand, a long tapered minute hand reaching right to the chapter ring, and a red tip seconds hand with a rectangular pip that skims the rehaut. That touch of red really livens up the dial without breaking the minimalist tone. There's no date window here, which I think is both a win and a loss. So we know that a date window really adds the practicality to the watch, but then it does sort of break up the dial and the symmetry unless the date window was at 6 o'clock. And now let's switch the lights off and the lume show begins. And Addiesdive never disappoints here. We get that signature BGW9 blue glow that's rich, even and surprisingly long lasting. It covers everything: the indices, the hands, even that tiny seconds pip, and the bezel markings. It's the kind of lume that outperforms watches triple its price. Seriously. The hands do look like it's sort of homaging the Ranger look, but that luminous bezel around it, which is actually an excellent bezel, and I do get that watch dives feel. It's premium, it's ratchety, but it's sort of tuned down. And this is like, it doesn't feel like an Addiesdive bezel, if you know what I mean. Like, this is really good stuff. Anyways, $70 before tax, I think that's a very sharp price. And considering we're approaching the biggest sale of the year, I'd be watching out for deals on this one right here. So check out the affiliate link to this watch in the description below, as well as the discount codes and the link to my collection. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.